I'm Zac Zidik. I'm the developer of this first class application that I'm going to give you a little demo of here today. First, we're going to talk about a little bit what technologies we're using. So we're using the Microsoft Connect. We're also using Microsoft Speech API, and we're using some multiplayer protocols to get a second screen experience using this Microsoft Surface Book. So I'm going to start the application. On the monitor here is screen 1. This is actually the server for the multiplayer application. And then on the Surface Book here, this is screen 2. And this is serving as the client for the multiplayer application. So here we have several modules that we can choose from. We have some learning modules that serve as tutorials, how to use the system, and then we have an actual practice teaching module. So let's first go through and take attendance of our class. Okay, you can see the list of names here, so I can call them out by name. Bridget. Bridget. So Bridget heard me, she raises her hand, recognizing that she's here. She's also checked off here on our second screen experience. And you can see that her attention level has raised. These pencil grids or meters represent how well your students are paying attention. Here are some tips on how to use the system, and tells you a little bit about what's going on while you're using it. So I'm not going to go through and take attendance of everybody, but that's basically your first practice module of how to use the system. Our second practice module here is called Now You See Me, and I'm going to have to stand up to do this one. But you'll see as I walk around in front of the Connect, my position in the actual virtual classroom here changes. And as I move around, different students are able to see me. They wave because I kind of raised my hand there. They can also respond to that. You'll see the ones that can see me are looking at me, and the ones that can't, sort of the two in the back there, are kind of just leaning, trying to see me, and not really paying attention because they're not able to. So as I move around, you'll see their attention meters move up and down as the ones that can see me get higher attention and the ones that can't get lower attention. So the object of this module is to find a place in the physical room here where all your students can see you. So now we'll go to the third practice module here, which is called proximity practice. Which now, instead of using line of sight, we're using actual how close am I to each student. So this is Bridget here in the corner. You see I'm pretty close to her right now, and her attention meter is up to 95%. If I move over to the other side of the room here, which is awfully tight here in my little cubicle, you'll see if I get closer here to Renee here in the other corner, you'll see Renee has now spiked up. So this is just a general practice for you to learn to move around the classroom and how being closer physically to a student might affect their attention levels. Alright, so we're going to talk briefly about a little bit about the characters themselves, the students, and what they're capable of. So obviously I'm talking directly to Colgate here. He's not looking at me, but I can ask him to do that. Colgate, look at me. So that's one of the things they can do. He can also, Colgate, smile. Colgate, look at me. Smile. Frown. Raise your hand. Put your hand down. Might be a good time to mention a little bit of the idiosyncrasies of speech recognition. It basically takes what you say and does the best it can to translate it. So if you mumble a little bit, if you mispronounce something, it might give you a false positive. Sort of one of the caveats of speech recognition at this point. So let's go back to Colgate. Colgate? Colgate. Okay, so a little bit about their behavior system that's going on. So right now, you can see Colgate's attention meter is pretty low. So he's sort of just going through a random number of behaviors, and he switches also in a random time frame. Colgate, close your mouth. I'm not sure why he had his mouth open, but that was annoying me, so I told him to close his mouth. So he's going through a random number of behaviors, sitting in different positions, twiddling his fingers, sort of tapping his feet, sort of just looking around the room at other students, maybe out the window. These are all kind of just random behaviors that go on when a student's attention meter is down. So each student has an attention meter, obviously. They also have a rate of decline of attention, which is actually different for front row students and back row students. And then they also have basically a retention of attention meter that once you've called on them, they'll remain at attention for a certain amount of time before they start to fall out of attention, which is realistic. If I'm talking to you directly and you're listening to me, you're not going to immediately stop listening to me as soon as I'm not talking to you. So that's a little bit about how the system works. They have random things like how they blink, how they nod their heads yes and no. That's another thing they can do. Nod yes, nod no. So that also the nods themselves are a random number of nods and a random speed. So the goal of all this random stuff, they also raise their hand at a random rate and put it down at a random rate, because it looks weird if you call on everybody and they all immediately raise their hands at this exact same rate and they immediately put it down at the same rate. It looks a lot more lifelike for it to be a little more random. All right, so we went through the 3 learning modules, which basically taught you how to use the system. Now we're going to jump into the first teaching module, which you can actually use to practice teaching. So I'm going to select this lesson. We've chosen to do a little lesson on bullying. Here's a body of text that basically gives you what you should be talking about during this lesson. And of course our tips are there. So what we're going to do here is use all the things we learned in the practice modules, moving around the room, getting closer and farther away from particular students, and also calling on students while we give the lecture. So doing all those things is going to contribute to how well the students are paying attention while I'm giving this lecture. Calling on students is another one of the ways you can keep their attention up. So I called on Colgate here, and I could just keep going through my lecture, but talk directly to Colgate for a period of time. Then I can go back to talking to the whole class by saying, everyone, everyone. Okay, so let's say I've gone through this whole lecture, and I've told them everything I want them to know. Well, the next thing we can do is here we select this button called Quiz Time. So when I push Quiz Time, we've captured for all the students, we've captured an average attention for that period of time while I was giving the lecture. Now we have a series of questions that we can ask them. And we can push this button to ask them, or I can verbally say them. So let me verbally say one. Is there only one type of bullying? So I was talking directly to Colgate there, so he was the only one that answered, but all the students in their heads basically answered the question. Let me go back to talk to the whole class here. Class, I'm going to ask them a second question. Can bullying happen on the internet? Can bullying happen on the internet? So there you saw the whole class answer. And by default, they answer by nodding their heads yes or no. But you can also ask them to raise their hand in response to a question. And you just have to rephrase the question a little bit. Raise your hand if you think it's okay to talk to an adult about bullying. So there you see the students responded by raising their hands. So the ones that thought yes, raised their hands. The ones that thought no, just kept their hands down. So I'm going to go through and just ask them the rest of these questions by pushing the buttons. This is sort of the cheater way. But you can see they're responding to the questions as I push the button and it lights up. So once I've asked all the questions, you get a new button here called Quiz Results. And here we can see basically the scores for all our students. You can see Bridget got 5 out of 9, Colgate got 6 out of 9, Darren got 4 out of 9, and so on and so on. Colgate got the highest score here because I directly called on him while I was giving the lecture. Actually, I think I accidentally talked to Bridget too, so that's why her score is up. So these quiz scores are direct relation to what their average attention was during that lesson time. And you can actually switch back and forth here, and this shows what their average attention was during the lesson. And you can see here Renee is at 66% average attention during the lesson, and that is why she got 6 out of 9. Whereas Steve is at 41% and he only got 4 out of 9 correct. So basically, higher attentions lead to higher quiz scores.